The sound of a champagne glass ringing cut through the buzz of conversation, a sharp artificial note that made my teeth hurt. All eyes swung to the front of the barn. There she was, Chloe, my sister-in-law, backlit by twinkling fairy lights, holding a microphone like she was about to accept a Grammy, not give a wedding toast. That signature smirk was already playing on her lips, the one I'd come to know so well. "Hello, everyone! For those who don't know me, I'm Chloe, the bride's incredibly talented and slightly more successful older sister." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. I forced a smile, my hand finding Sarah's under the table. She gave my fingers a squeeze. God, she was radiant, the only real light in this whole, stifling room. "I just wanted to say a few words about my baby sister," Chloe continued, her voice oozing a false, honeyed warmth. "Sarah has always been the sweet one, the kind one, the one who, bless her heart, always roots for the underdog." A few more chuckles. My smile tightened. The barn was way too hot, the air thick with the smell of 100 perfumes and the caterer's garlic mashed potatoes. A bead of sweat traced a path down my spine. "And when she told me she was dating Alex," she said, her eyes finally landing on me, they were like 2 chips of blue ice. Well, I'll be honest. We were all a little surprised. The laughter was a little quieter this time, more uncertain. "I mean, Alex is solid, dependable. He has a job." She paused, letting the word hang in the air, naked and pathetic. "A real 9-to-5 job. At a bank, right, Alex? You push papers?" The room was dead silent now. You could hear the soft hum of the industrial air conditioner struggling against the summer heat. Sarah's grip on my hand had gone rigid. "And I just think it's so wonderful," Chloe pressed on, her voice dripping with condescension. "In a world so obsessed with ambition, with drive, with building something real, it's refreshing to see a man so content with just being. A true supporting character in the story of his own life." The silence was absolute. 100 pairs of eyes were drilling into me, a mixture of pity and second-hand embarrassment. My face was on fire. I could feel the cold, smooth weight of the butter knife under my fingertips, a pointless anchor in a rising sea of humiliation. The cheap polyester of my suit jacket felt like sandpaper against my skin. She raised her glass, her smile widening into something truly vicious. "So let's raise a glass to the happy couple. To Sarah for her beautiful, forgiving heart, and to Alex for finally finding a stable job, even if it is just pushing papers." The applause was weak, scattered, confused. People were staring into their drinks, at the barn's wooden ceiling, anywhere but at me. Chloe placed the microphone down with a definitive thud and floated back to her seat, the queen accepting her due. Sarah was whispering in my ear, "I'm so sorry, honey. Ignore her, she's drunk." But her words were just a distant buzz. All I could hear was the blood roaring in my ears. All I could see was Chloe's triumphant smirk from across the room. Just pushing papers. That's what she thought I did. As the heat of shame began to cool, something else took its place, a cold, hard clarity. It started in my chest, a knot of ice, and spread outwards until my fingertips were numb. I looked down at my hands, then back up at Chloe, who was now laughing loudly at some joke. Completely oblivious, she had no idea the kind of access I had, no idea the quiet authority that came with my paper-pushing title. Senior loan underwriter. To her, it was a joke. To me, it was a set of keys to every financial kingdom in this city. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a single, soft vibration. A notification. I didn't need to look to know what it was. I'd been waiting for it. The final piece. I leaned over to Sarah, my voice calm, low. "It's okay, really. Don't worry about it." She looked at me, her eyes wide with concern. "Alex, are you all right?" I gave her a small, quiet smile, the kind she'd seen 1,000 times before when I was working through a complex problem. A thinking smile. "I'm perfect," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I took a slow sip of water, the ice-cold liquid a shock to my system. She said, "Just pushing papers," but she had no idea the papers I was about to push were hers. And for the first time all night, my smile was completely, utterly genuine. The first time I met Chloe, she was wearing that same perfume. It hit me before she even rounded the corner of her parents. porch, a dense, woody scent, like oud and expensive regret. It was Thanksgiving. Sarah had been nervous, her hand a little clammy in mine. "Just remember," she'd whispered, squeezing my fingers as the front door swung open. "She's a lot, but she's family." A lot. That was an understatement. Chloe appeared in the doorway, a vision in cashmere and judgment. Her eyes did the thing I'd learned to know so well. The quick, head-to-toe scan, the instant calculation of net worth, social status, and overall threat level. I, in my simple wool coat and dependable shoes, clearly registered as 0. "Well, aren't you just adorable?" she'd said, not smiling. She air-kissed Sarah and then turned the full force of her attention on me. "So, Sarah tells me you're in finance." She said it like she was asking if I collected roadkill. "Banking, yeah. Commercial underwriting, mostly," I said, trying to keep it simple. Her eyes glazed over instantly. "Oh, how stable." She already sounded bored. "Come in, then. Don't track anything on the runner. It's new." That was the blueprint. For 5 years, that was the dynamic. Sarah and I built a life in our cozy, slightly messy bungalow with its warm, lived-in feel, the scent of real food cooking, the comfortable clutter of books on the coffee table, the soft glow of lamplight in the evenings. It was ours. It was real. Chloe's world was the opposite. A perfectly staged, coldly elegant condo that smelled of that perfume and lemony cleaning products. No books, only art books. No mess, no life. We'd be over for a family dinner, and the interrogation would begin. "So, Alex," she'd say, swirling the wine in her glass, "still underwriting?" She always put that little pause in there, like the word itself was beneath her. "Still am. Got a promotion, actually. Senior now." "A promotion! How nice. A little more money for a little more paperwork." She'd take a delicate sip. "You really should think bigger. A man in your position, well, you need to be building assets, not just working for a paycheck." I just nod. "I'm happy where I am, Chloe. The benefits are good." She'd laugh, a light, tinkling sound that held no warmth. "Benefits! Spoken like a true employee, not an owner, not a creator." The worst was after we bought our house. She came over for the obligatory tour, her heels clicking on our hardwood floors. She stopped in the middle of the living room, her nose subtly wrinkling. I could smell her Tom Ford oud wood, cutting through the smell of our fresh paint. "It's cozy, Alex," she said, her tone implying it was a contagious disease. "A real starter home. You'll be able to move up in a few years, I'm sure, once you really build some equity." Sarah would always defend her later. In the quiet sanctuary of our kitchen, she'd be loading the dishwasher, her back to me, her voice tired. "Don't take it personally, honey. That's just how Chloe is. She's all talk. She doesn't mean anything by it." "She means every word of it, Sarah," I'd say, leaning against the counter. "She thinks I'm a loser." "She does not," Sarah would insist, but the protest was weak. She knew it was true. "She's just driven. She measures everything by a different ruler." Driven. That was the word everyone used. It sounded so much better than desperate for validation. The contrasts became starker. Her social media was a flood of her new Mercedes, her designer handbags, her business lunches at trendy restaurants. Our life was quiet. Real. We were saving for a future. She was financing a facade. One afternoon, she stopped by the bank. I was at my desk, reviewing a stack of loan applications, when her perfume announced her arrival. She stood in the doorway of my small utilitarian office, looking profoundly out of place. "I was in the neighborhood," she lied, her eyes scanning my diplomas, my family photos, my tidy desk, dismissing it all. "I just had to see the famous office. Wow. It's so efficient. Can I help you with something, Chloe?" "Just being supportive," she said, her smile a razor blade. "It's so interesting to see where it all happens. All these little numbers." She gestured vaguely at the papers on my desk. "It must be so satisfying, in a simple sort of way." She left without buying anything, of course. The visit had only one purpose, to see my domain and confirm her superiority. To her, my career wasn't a profession. It was a hamster wheel. And she was the one building empires. I'd watch her hold court at family barbecues, holding a glass of rosé, holding forth on market trends and investment strategies she'd clearly just read about in a magazine that morning. Everyone would nod, impressed. She was a master of the performance. And I'd stay quiet. I'd sip my beer. I'd listen to her spout nonsense about commercial real estate valuations and bite my tongue. I told myself it was to keep the peace. For Sarah. But the truth was, my flaw was deeper than that. I wanted so badly to be accepted by this family I'd married into that I was willing to play the fool. I downplayed my own expertise, my own intelligence, because I thought being non-threatening was the way to earn a place at the table. I was so naive. I didn't realize that in Chloe's world, there was no place at the table for people like me. There was only the spotlight, and everyone else was just part of the audience. The first I heard of the studio was at a Sunday barbecue. The smell of charcoal and searing meat filled the air, a familiar, comfortable scent. Chloe held court by the patio table, a glass of Pinot Grigio in one hand, her phone in the other. "It's not just a gym," she was saying to a captive audience of aunts and uncles. "It's a lifestyle brand, a community. We're targeting a specific clientele, professionals who value exclusivity." I was turning burgers next to Sarah's dad, content to stay out of it, but her voice carried. "And the best part," she said, pausing for dramatic effect. "The bank totally saw my vision. They know a winner when they see one. The loan officer said my business plan was one of the most compelling he'd ever seen. Unlike some people, she didn't even look at me. She didn't have to." Later, she cornered me by the cooler. The scent of her perfume mixed unpleasantly with the smell of beer and sunscreen. "Alex, I need to pick your brain," she said, her tone implying she was doing me a favor. "Professional to professional." She flashed her phone in my face. It was an email. The subject line: "Loan application preliminarily approved." The amount: $200,000. The bank was a competitor, a smaller local institution known for aggressive small business lending. "See that? $200K. They get it. They understand what it takes to build an empire." "That's a lot for a new venture, Chloe," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She waved a dismissive hand, her acrylic nails catching the sun. "Please. It's a drop in the bucket for the returns I'll see. My projections are insane. I'm projecting 300 members at $300 a month within the first year. The math is easy." She beamed, so proud of her basic multiplication. A cold trickle of professional dread started in my gut. "That's nearly $1 million in annual revenue. From a single studio, in a market that's already saturated. What's your client acquisition cost? How did you arrive at those numbers?" Her smile tightened. "I have a vibe, Alex, you wouldn't understand. It's about the aesthetic, the experience. You deal in numbers, I deal in desire." She leaned in condescendingly. "Let me explain it simply. People will pay a premium for a premium product." "I understand the concept of a premium product," I said, my voice flat. "I also understand burn rate and unit economics. Chloe, are you sure about these projections? This client acquisition cost seems optimistic. How much are you budgeting for marketing?" She sighed, a long-suffering sound. "This is why you're stuck where you are. You're so focused on the pennies you miss the dollars. The vision, Alex. Focus on the vision." She tapped her temple. "It's all up here." A week later, she insisted on showing me the space. It was a raw, empty storefront in a newly developed strip mall that was still half vacant. The air was thick with the smell of fresh drywall dust and new rubber flooring. Blueprints were taped haphazardly to a wall. "This," she announced, her voice echoing in the cavernous empty room, "will be the reception. Gold accents, marble desk. Over there, the juice bar. All organic, cold-pressed, of course." She paced the perimeter, a general surveying her future kingdom. "The lighting is key. It has to be perfect for selfies. That's literally how you market now. You don't need to buy ads, Alex. You just need to be Instagrammable." I walked over to the blueprints. They were rudimentary, no detailed electrical layouts, no plumbing specs. Just boxes labeled yoga room and spin zone. Chloe, who did these plans? Did you have a contractor look at these? The build-out costs alone. I have a guy, she interrupted, brushing dust off her designer jeans. He gets the vision. We're going to do most of it ourselves. Keep costs lean. Lean, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. I pointed to a corner. That's where you'll need your heaviest HVAC. 50 people working out in a sealed room generates a massive heat load. If you skimp there, this place will be a sauna in a month. She stared at me blankly. It's a hot yoga room, that's the point. Not that kind of hot, I said, but I could see she'd already stopped listening. She was looking at her reflection in the glass of the front door, adjusting her hair. The loan officer said I was a dream client, she mused, more to herself than to me. He said my passion was infectious. He practically begged me to take the money. I felt a familiar frustration rise in my throat. This wasn't a business. It was a fantasy. A $200,000 fantasy built on vibes and a loan officer who either didn't do his due diligence or was blinded by her confidence. Chloe, I said, my last attempt at being the voice of reason. Listen to me. This is a huge risk. The fitness industry has a failure rate of over 80% in the first 5 years. Your projections they're not realistic. They're a fantasy. You need to go back to the drawing board, scale it down, start smaller. She turned to me, and for the first time, the mask of amused condescension slipped completely. Her eyes were hard. Or what? She asked, her voice low and cold. You'll tell me I can't do it? You'll try to sabotage me with your spreadsheets? She spat the word out. Run along, little man. Go push your papers. Some of us are actually building something. She turned her back on me, pulling out her phone to take a picture of the empty space, already crafting the perfect caption for her social media. I stood there in the empty, echoing room, the chemical smell of new rubber filling my lungs. I had tried. I had offered a lifeline of hard, cold facts. She had not only refused it, she had mocked the hand that held it out. She was so sure of her own victory. So sure, my world of numbers and rules and caution was inferior to her world of vision and desire. She had no idea that those spreadsheets were the foundation everything was built on, and that I knew exactly how to make them crumble. The laughter was a physical thing. It washed over me in a hot, suffocating wave. It wasn't the kind of laughter that comes from a good joke. It was the nervous, complicit laughter of a crowd that's just witnessed a public execution and doesn't know whether to cheer or look away. Most of them chose to look away. At their plates, at their drinks, anywhere but at me. I kept my eyes fixed on the stem of my water glass. The condensation felt cold and slick under my thumb. I focused on that sensation, on the slow, deliberate rhythm of my own breathing. In, out. Sarah's hand was on my arm, her fingers trembling. I'm going to kill her, she whispered, her voice thick with tears of anger and humiliation. I am so sorry, Alex. I just nodded. I couldn't speak. If I opened my mouth, I didn't know what would come out. A roar of rage, a string of curses that would ruin my wife's wedding day. Or nothing at all. Chloe's words echoed in the ringing silence she'd left behind. A supporting character. The phrase carved itself into my mind. It was the perfect, final summation of everything she thought of me. Not a threat. Not even a person. Set dressing. The low hum of conversation slowly started to return. A forced, polite murmur. People were trying to pretend it hadn't happened. The band started up again, a soft, jazzy number that felt obscenely cheerful. The clatter of cutlery on plates resumed. That's when I felt it. A single, soft buzz against my thigh. My phone, set to silent, vibrating in my pocket. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to stay in this moment of pure, white-hot shame. But years of habit, of professional obligation, took over. It could be work, a system alert, an emergency, I muttered an excuse to Sarah, something about needing air, and stood up. The legs of my chair scraped loudly against the wooden floor. A few heads turned. I didn't care. I walked, my steps unnaturally even, towards the large open barn door that led out into the cooling night. I stepped outside, the sudden quiet a shock. The air was clean out here, smelling of cut grass and distant rain, washing the smell of perfume and garlic from my lungs. I leaned against the rough-hewn wood of the barn, the vibrations from the music inside thrumming through the wall. I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed, a rectangle of cold, blue light in the darkness. It was a work email. The sender was our automated risk assessment system. My stomach tightened. We only got these for high-priority flags. The subject line made the breath catch in my throat. Nugent review, flagged application, Chloe, Sarah's last name, app number 78274. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic pounding rhythm that drowned out the music. My thumb hovered over the screen. This was it, the final piece of her bragging. The loan approval. The thought of seeing it, of having her triumph officially documented, made me feel sick. But I opened it. It was a standard automated memo. The following application has been flagged by Tier 2 review algorithms for discrepancies in stated financials and pledged collateral. Requires immediate senior underwriter analysis prior to final approval and disbursement. My eyes scanned the details. There it was. The loan amount, $200,000. The business, Verve Lifestyle Studio. The stated annual revenue projection, $900,000. I almost laughed. It was even more absurd seeing it in black and white. The algorithm had flagged it for grossly inflated and unsupported revenue projections based on market comparables. Of course it had. Any basic system would. I was about to dismiss it, to wallow in the confirmation of her idiocy, when my eyes dropped to the next section. Collateral pledged. 1. Business assets, equipment, fixtures. Estimated value $75,000. 2. Primary residence, 1815 Maple Drive. The world tilted. 1815 Maple Drive. That wasn't her address. Her condo was on the waterfront. 1815 Maple Drive was her parents' house. The family home. The place where Sarah grew up. Where we'd had every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. She'd used her parents' house as collateral. Without their knowledge. She'd lied on the application, claiming ownership. The initial fraud was one thing. Stupid, arrogant, but almost expected. This was different. This was a deeper, more intimate betrayal. It wasn't just against the bank. It wasn't just against me. It was against her own family. Against Sarah. Against her aging parents who had given her everything. The cold clarity that had started to form inside me during her speech now solidified into a diamond-hard point. The public humiliation was one thing. But this was monstrous. I stood there in the dark, the phone's glow illuminating my face. The sounds of the reception, the music, the laughter, faded into a distant, meaningless buzz. All I could hear was the blood roaring in my ears. I saw her at the barbecue, waving her hand. The bank totally saw my vision. I saw her in the empty studio, brushing off my warnings. You're so focused on the pennies. I saw her smug, triumphant face at the podium. A supporting character. She wasn't just a bully, she was a fraud. A reckless, selfish fraud who would gamble her own family's home on her pathetic, Instagrammable fantasy. A supporting character. I looked down at the phone, at the damning evidence glowing on the screen. Right, and supporting characters have access to the admin panel. I pushed off from the wall. The numbness was gone, replaced by a terrifying, focused calm. I turned my back on the lights and the music and the laughter. I had work to do. The coffee shop was her choice. The grind. A sterile, modern place, all sharp angles and blonde wood, smelling of over-roasted beans and steamed milk. It was neutral territory. I got there early. I needed to. I needed to anchor myself in the calm, to breathe in the quiet before the storm. I chose a table in the back, away from the few students tapping on laptops. I sat facing the door. I ordered a black coffee. It arrived in a heavy ceramic mug. I held it, letting the heat seep into my palms, a small, physical sensation to focus on. She was 10 minutes late. Of course she was. She made an entrance, the bell on the door jingling as she swept in. That damn perfume announced her first, cutting through the coffee smell like a knife. Heads turned. She wore a sharp, expensive-looking athleisure outfit, her hair perfectly tousled, as if she'd just come from a photo shoot, not a workout. She spotted me and glided over, not a hint of apprehension on her face, only impatience. She didn't sit. She placed her hands on the back of the opposite chair and leaned forward. Well, this is a surprise. What's so important it couldn't wait? I have a million things to do. The contractor is finally coming by today. She didn't even say hello. Sit down, Chloe. My voice was flat. Calm. It didn't sound like my voice. A flicker of surprise crossed her features. She was used to my quiet deference. This was new. She hesitated, then pulled the chair out and sat, perching on the edge as if ready to bolt at any second. She didn't order anything. "This is about yesterday, isn't it?" she said, rolling her eyes. "Look, if you're that sensitive about a little joke, I apologize. Okay? Happy? Some people just can't take a roast." "This isn't about the toast," I said, my voice low. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was bitter. "This is about your loan application." Her posture changed instantly. The casual impatience vanished, replaced by a wary, defensive rigidity. "What about it?" "You listed collateral you don't own, Chloe. You committed fraud." There it was, laid out between us on the cheap metal table, no sugarcoating, no soft pedaling. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flash of genuine panic before her mask of arrogance slammed back down. "I have no idea what you're talking about." 1815 Maple Drive, I said, the address hanging in the air between us. "Your parents' house. You don't own it. You forged the documents. The system flagged it. It's over." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. She actually tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry, brittle sound. "Oh my God. Are you seriously spying on me? That's pathetic, Alex. Even for you. My loan is fine. It's approved. The money will be in my account on Monday. My loan officer, Derek, he's handling everything." "Derek is a relationship manager," I said, my tone still eerily calm. "He gets a commission for signing you up. He doesn't do the final underwriting. I do, and your application has been red flagged. It's dead in the water." The use of industry terms, relationship manager, underwriting, seemed to throw her. She was used to dismissing my job as pushing papers. She didn't understand the mechanics, the power structure. She just knew someone named Derek had been nice to her. "You," she sputtered, her composure finally cracking. "You did this. You sabotaged me." "I didn't need to," I said, shaking my head slowly. "You sabotaged yourself. I'm just the one who found the wreckage. Withdraw the application, Chloe. Now, before this goes any further, before your parents get a call from the bank's fraud department." The mention of her parents was a direct hit. Her face flushed a deep, angry red. She leaned across the table, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "You are jealous. You're a small, petty, jealous little man who can't stand to see me succeed. You've always been jealous of me." I didn't flinch. I just watched her. "This isn't about jealousy. This is about you risking your family's home for a marble juice bar and good lighting for selfies." "It's a vision. Something you could never understand," she shot back, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "You think you're so smart with your numbers and your rules. Those are for people who don't have what it takes to break them, to be somebody." "Withdraw the application, Chloe," I repeated, my voice hardening just a fraction. "This is your last chance to walk away from this with just embarrassment, not a felony fraud charge." She stared at me, her chest heaving. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of risk, the absolute, unshakable belief in her own invincibility winning out. Her expression shifted from rage to pure, unadulterated contempt. "Or what?" she sneered, the words dripping with mockery. "You'll tell on me? Run along, little man. Run back to your little cubicle and push your little papers. My loan officer says I'm a dream client. The money will be there Monday, and there's not a single thing you can do to stop it." She stood up so abruptly her chair screeched against the floor. Every head in the coffee shop turned to look. She didn't care. She leaned down, putting her face close to mine. I could smell the coffee on her breath, layered over that expensive perfume. "You stay out of my way," she whispered, her voice cold and deadly serious. "This is none of your business. You're just a supporting character, remember? Know your role." And with that, she turned and walked out, leaving me sitting there with my cooling coffee and the echoing silence of her choice. The door jingled shut behind her. I sat there for a long time. The heat from the mug was gone. All that was left was the cold ceramic. She had been given a ladder out of the hole she'd dug. She had chosen, instead, to kick it away and keep digging. She had made it my business. The hum of my computer was the only sound in the house. Sarah was still at her parents', trying to smooth over the disaster of the reception. The silence was a blanket, heavy and absolute. I sat at my desk in the home office, the warm glow of the lamp, the only pool of light in the room. The rest of the house was dark, quiet, waiting. My personal laptop was open beside my work monitor. On one screen, the flagged loan application glowed, a monument to her arrogance. On the other, a blank document, a memo. The most important one I would ever write. This wasn't about anger anymore. The white-hot fury from the reception had cooled into something else, something precise, surgical. This was a clinical procedure. I was not a vengeful husband. I was a senior underwriter, and my professional opinion was that this loan represented an unacceptable risk to my institution. I began to type. The soft click of the keys was a metronome in the silence. Memorandum. To Loan Committee Final Approval Desk. From Alex, S-name Senior Underwriter. RE Urgent Review, High-Risk Application, number 78,274, Verve Lifestyle Studio. I structured it like any other risk assessment. Objective. Fact-based, unemotional. I started with the revenue projections. I pulled market data, charts, comparables for fitness studios in a 15-mile radius. I cited failure rates. I used her own, publicly available social media posts against her. The empty shell of the studio, the lack of any pre-opening buzz beyond her own circle. I mathematically dismantled her vibe and aesthetic into a column of financial ruin. The words flowed. Each sentence was a brick, meticulously placed, building an unassailable wall of logic. The applicant's projections appear divorced from market reality. The client acquisition cost is unsupported by any tangible marketing plan. The business model demonstrates a fundamental lack of industry understanding. Then, I moved to the collateral. This is where the tone shifted, ever so slightly. The language became sharper, colder. Of graver concern is a significant discrepancy regarding pledged collateral. The application lists the property at 1815 Maple Drive as primary residence and collateral. A review of county tax assessor records, attached, indicates the deed holders are parents, names, not the applicant. No documentation provided supports a claim of ownership or transfer of equity. This represents a material misrepresentation. Material misrepresentation. That was the term, professional, clean, and deadly. I didn't accuse her of fraud, I simply presented the facts and let them point to the only possible conclusion. I attached the documents. The tax records, screenshots of the loan application itself, It was all there. A perfect, self-contained narrative of catastrophic risk. I didn't make it personal. I never mentioned she was my sister-in-law. I never referenced the wedding. This wasn't about a family feud. This was about protecting the bank. My justification was pure, unimpeachable fiduciary duty. I read it over once, then twice. Every word was chosen for maximum impact and absolute professionalism. It was a masterpiece of quiet destruction. I hadn't sabotaged her. I hadn't needed to. I simply removed the filter of her charm, her confidence, her lies, and let the raw, ugly truth speak for itself. The final line was the knife twist. Given the egregious inflation of projections, the complete lack of a realistic business plan, and the material misrepresentation of collateral, I cannot, in good professional conscience, recommend this loan for approval. I recommend immediate freezing of all disbursements and a full audit by the Fraud Prevention Department. I didn't feel a thrill. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt a profound, weary calm. This was just the final step in a sequence she herself had set in motion. I was merely the instrument of consequence. I saved the document. I attached the files. My cursor hovered over the send button. The email was addressed to a generic, high-level committee inbox, a black hole from which applications rarely emerged. It was carbon copied to my direct superior, a by-the-book man who hated risk more than he hated Monday mornings. He would see the same thing I saw, a disaster waiting to happen. I took a slow, deep breath. The house was so still I could hear the refrigerator kick on downstairs. I looked at the time. 4:58 p.m. Friday. Perfect. I clicked send. The screen flickered. A confirmation message appeared. Your message has been sent. That was it. No fanfare. No dramatic music. Just the soft whoosh of an email, leaving my outbox. Carrying her $200,000 dream into the digital ether to be dissected and dismissed by a committee of strangers on Monday morning. I leaned back in my chair, the blue light of the monitors reflected in the dark window pane. I could see my own face, pale and serious, superimposed over the blackness of the night outside. I didn't sabotage her. I didn't need to. I simply removed the filter from the truth. I let her own lies speak for themselves. I closed the laptop. The screen went black, swallowing the evidence. The room was plunged into deeper darkness, save for the soft glow of the lamp. It was done. Monday morning dawned gray and quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air before a storm. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, the familiar routine a comfort. The rich, dark scent of the grounds was an anchor in the stillness. Sarah was moving around upstairs, getting ready for work. The normalcy of it was almost painful. My phone buzzed on the countertop at 9:17 a.m. Not a ring. A series of short, frantic vibrations. A call. Then, another. And another. I didn't have to look to know who it was. I let it go to voicemail. The silence returned for a moment, deeper than before. Then, the vibrations started again. Insistent. Panicked. On the fifth call, I picked it up. I didn't say hello. The sound on the other end was pure, undiluted hysterics. A raw, screaming sob, then a torrent of words, choked and barely coherent. "You did this, you son of a bitch! You ruined me! You ruined everything!" It was Chloe. Her voice was unrecognizable, stripped of all its polished, condescending melody. It was the sound of an animal caught in a trap. I stayed silent, holding the phone a few inches from my ear. The coffee maker gurgled softly behind me. "They froze it. The bank!" They called and said it was frozen. Pending review. "What did you do? What did you tell them?" I could hear her pacing, her breath coming in ragged, shuddering gasps. I could almost smell the panic through the phone, a sour, metallic tang overriding her expensive perfume. "I didn't tell them anything they didn't already know, Chloe. I said, my voice flat, calm. The truth has a way of coming out. The truth? You lied! You told them lies about me, she shrieked. I'll sue you. I'll have your job. Her tirade was cut short by another voice in the background, muffled, older, angry, her father's. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, a low, thunderous roar of betrayal. Daddy, no, it's not. It's a misunderstanding. Chloe's voice suddenly shifted, pleading, desperate, directed away from the phone. He's lying. Alex is lying to them. There was a sharp crackle as the phone was wrestled from her. Then her father's voice, shaking with a fury I had never heard from the gentle man, came on the line. Alex? Is that you? What in God's name is going on? The bank just called us. They asked if we had pledged our house as collateral for a business loan. Our house? I closed my eyes. This was the part one hadn't wanted. The shrapnel. It's true, I said, my voice quiet. She listed it on the application. She claimed she owned it. The silence on his end was worse than the screaming. It was the sound of a heart breaking. I heard him exhale, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime of disappointments in his daughter. Oh, Chloe, he whispered, not to me. What have you done? The phone clattered to the floor. I heard more yelling, crying, a door slamming. Then the line went dead. I stood there, in my quiet kitchen, the phone still in my hand. The victory, if that's what it was, felt like ash in my mouth. The front door opened, and Sarah came in, her cheeks rosy from the cool morning air. She was smiling, holding up a paper bag. I forgot my lunch, and I got you a Danish from that place. You. Her smile faded as she saw my face. Alex, what's wrong? You're white as a sheet. Before I could answer, her phone rang. She pulled it out of her purse, glanced at the screen. It's Mom, she answered, her voice bright. Hey, Mom, what's... The brightness vanished. Her face fell. What? Slow down. What are you talking about? She listened, her eyes widening, then flicking to me. Confusion and dawning horror in them. The house? Chloe's loan? Mom, please, just breathe. She sank onto a kitchen chair, the paper bag forgotten on the table. She did what? Her voice was a whisper. She listened for another minute, her free hand coming up to cover her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. Is Daddy okay? Oh, God. She ended the call a few minutes later, dropping the phone onto the table as if it had burned her. She looked at me, her expression shattered. Alex? Her voice was small, broken. Did you know about this? I found out on Saturday, I said, my own voice hoarse. I tried to get her to withdraw it. She told me to know my role. Sarah stared at me, the pieces clicking into place. The confrontation at the coffee shop. My quiet intensity all weekend. She wasn't stupid. She understood the mechanics of my job. She knew what I could do. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. I know she deserved it, she said, her voice cracking. I know what she said to you was horrible. What she did was, it's insane. It's fraud. She wiped at her cheek, her hand trembling. But she's my sister. My parents. They're devastated. Our family. God, Alex. Our family will never be the same. She put her face in her hands and began to cry, not the angry tears from the wedding, but deep, grieving sobs for the family that had just been torn apart. I went to her, knelt beside her chair, put my arms around her. She cried into my shoulder, her body shaking. I held her tight. I had won. I had executed a perfect, professional, devastating revenge. I had exposed the fraud and protected the bank. I had served justice. But as I held my weeping wife, the cost of that victory settled on me, cold and leaden. It wasn't clean. It wasn't satisfying. The revenge had worked perfectly, but it had an unintended consequence. It had broken the heart of the one person I loved most in the world. The one person I had wanted to protect all along. The silence in the kitchen was no longer peaceful. It was haunted. Weeks bled into months. The seasons turned. The fierce heat of that summer wedding gave way to the crisp decay of fall, and then the deep, silent freeze of winter. Our street, once just a place we lived, became a sanctuary. In the mornings, I'd stand at the kitchen window with a mug of coffee, watching the steam curl into the cold air inside. I'd see the neighbors leave for work, their headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gray. The world was quiet, peaceful. The fallout was permanent. Chloe's business venture evaporated. The for lease sign went back up in the window of the empty storefront. The bank thankfully decided not to press charges after the loan was formally withdrawn, but the mark was on her record. She moved to a different city, a few states over. The story she told there was undoubtedly different. We didn't speak. We were a ghost story to each other now. Her parents, Sarah's parents, were changed. They'd aged a decade in those few months. They came over for dinner sometimes, but the laughter was quieter, the conversations careful, skirting around the giant Chloe-shaped hole in the middle of the room. They never blamed me, not out loud, but a sadness lived with them now, a permanent resident. Sarah grieved. For the sister she thought she had. For the family that used to be. We'd lie in bed at night, and sometimes she'd just sigh. A long, weary sound that said everything. I'd pull her closer, and we'd lie there in the dark, listening to the wind outside our window, grateful for the solid walls of our own home. One Saturday morning we were cleaning out the garage. The radio was playing some old, soft rock song. The air was cold and smelled of dust and gasoline from the lawnmower. Sarah held up a box of old photos. She sifted through them, a small smile touching her lips. There was one of her and Chloe as kids, covered in mud, grinning like maniacs. "She wasn't always like that, you know," she said softly, not looking at me. "When we were little, she was the one who'd stick up for me on the playground." "I know," I said, and I did. The monster Chloe became was born from something, insecurity, a bottomless need. It didn't excuse her, but it explained her. Sarah put the photo back in the box and closed the flaps. "I don't miss who she became," she said, her voice firmer now. She looked at me. "But I'm sorry for what she put you through, and I'm glad you're who you are." She didn't say she was glad for what I did. She was glad for who I was, the man who built a life with her. A stable, quiet, real life, not an Instagram facade. I didn't get applause. I didn't get an apology from Chloe. I didn't get a thank you from her parents. I got what I needed in the end. Silence. The silence to hear my wife's laughter in the next room. The silence to enjoy my coffee in the morning. The silence to know that the life we built together was on a foundation of truth, not lies. The revenge wasn't about winning. It was about drawing a line. It was about proving that the world of quiet competence, of rules and numbers and honesty, was not weaker than the world of loud arrogance and deception. It was stronger. It was real. It endured. I finished stacking the boxes against the wall and walked over to Sarah, wrapping my arms around her from behind. She leaned back into me, her head resting on my shoulder. We stood there like that for a long time, watching the sunlight stream through the dusty garage window, illuminating the motes of dust dancing in the air. The most powerful revenge isn't about destruction, it's about construction. It's about building a life so solid, so peaceful, so genuinely good, that the noise of the people who tried to break you just becomes background static, fading away until you can barely hear it anymore. And if you're watching this, maybe you're dealing with your own Chloe. Someone who mistakes your quiet for weakness, your integrity for a lack of ambition. Remember this. The paper pushers, the rule followers, the ones who do the work no one sees, we hold the keys. Not to a flashy car or a fake empire, we hold the keys to the foundation. And sometimes, the most satisfying thing you can do is just turn the lock. If you find a sense of peace in that, if you believe in building something real instead of something loud, then hit that subscribe button. Let's build a community that values what's under the surface. Thanks for watching.